Okay, let's begin. Let's begin. Okay. Good morning, Food Conciencia community. I'm here with Bárbara Masoner. She is the co-founder and co-director of Grow Local Colorado Park. Before we begin, we'd like to let our audience know where they can find you. So what social media networks do you use? How could they find you?
We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we have a website, growlocalcolorado.org. So yeah, all those methods, people can find us and get in touch with us.
Fantastic. So why don't you tell us in your own words a little bit about the project? What is an edible park and things like that?
You bet. So 13 years ago, during the recession that hit most of the world, a lot of our neighbors were in financial straits. They were having problems getting enough food on the table. And a group of us came together and decided to have a project that would show both how we could address food equity, how we could address sustainability environmentally, and also how we could build community. And so we started out with one vegetable garden. Everything that we grew went to a local food pantry. And since then, in the past 13 years, we have grown to this year, we have 19 sites. Most of those are in public places. They're maintained by volunteers. And all of the food that we grow goes to either shelters or food pantries or soup kitchens or some other organization that serves those people that lack access to healthy food.
So how did that first garden look like? Was it in someone's front yard? Was it like a guerrilla tactic, or how did that go?
It wasn't quite guerrilla. Then mayor of the city allowed us to have one of the flower beds in Civic Center Park, which is the premier park in Denver. It's central. It's between the state capitol and the city and county building. A lot of our tourists stop by there because the flower beds are beautiful. So it was really quite the honor to be allowed to grow in that public space. And it was almost guerrilla gardening because we put in the garden before Parks and Recreation could approve of the design.
I see. Fantastic. Did you get this inspiration from any other project? Or do you see other projects like this?
We were inspired by what the Obama administration was doing, in particular Michelle Obama at the White House. They had just put in an organic garden, which was to address health for the American youth. And so we thought we could do that in our community, and we would emphasize not only health by getting people active, involved in the garden, but also by sharing that food with people most in need.
I see. So how would you, compare and contrast an edible park with a regular park?
I think an edible park is more the perennials. So you have trees and shrubs that provide that. Most of what we're growing in our vegetable garden are annual, such as tomatoes, peppers, eggplants. We have a very short grow season. We want to plant stuff that produces lots of food in a short amount of time.
Right. So how did it start growing from that, flower bed?
The first year was a real success. The vegetable garden didn't stand out. It was very aesthetically pleasing as well as productive. Because we got lots of write-ups, everywhere from as far away as Germany to local to national. The city found that was a big bonus for them. It was great PR. So they gave us a few more parks. And we just slowly, each year, we've grown. More and more people have heard about us. And so now we're partnering with churches, with the state, at the governor's mansion. So yeah, each year we add another partner and another component to what we're doing.
So You said you started growing at first food that was like really quick and gave lots throughout the year. My question is like, has that changed now that the project has grown?
As a matter of fact, it did last year. The Parks Department gave us 2 more beds in Civic Center Park, and we have put perennials in there. So we have plants that will come back year after year, like currant bushes and lots of herbs and that. So yeah, we have expanded so that it's not just the fast growing annuals. We're also doing some perennials as well.
I see. And I guess this is because now you have more like buy-in.
Yeah, we've got a little more clout. The city sees that we're saving them money because our volunteers are taking care of those beds instead of their employees having to. We've seen that every time I'm at that garden, somebody stops by that's a visitor to the park and says, "Wow, this is really neat. I want to do this in my community." And
Right.
Parks is, sees that as free PR for that.
Fantastic. So how many volunteers do you currently have?
So on an annual basis, we engage about 400 individuals, and of that, a quarter of those are youth. And by youth, we're talking kids that are 17 years or younger.
Okay. Like, would this be like high school students or middle school students or?
We actually occasionally have elementary students help us out. We had elementary students help us plant one of our gardens last year, and then they came and they helped us harvest it. So occasionally we do engage elementary school, but yeah, usually middle school and high school are what we would like to target, just because they are more understanding of what we're trying to accomplish.
Right, incapable, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So how would you describe your volunteers' profile?
That's so hard to say because it's across the board.
How many people?
Yeah, we have senior citizens that are 80 that are taking care of one garden. And another garden, it's clients that are dealing with addiction issues. Another one, it's a young family that goes to that church. So yeah, it's so hard to say there's one characteristic. I think the one characteristic is they're compassionate and they want to see change.
So would you say like every garden tends to cater towards certain like crowd? Is there autonomy between the gardens?
I think that's a really good characterization, that each garden has their own kind of feel to them and different attractions. With the Civic Center garden, because now we have 8 beds that we're in charge of, we engage every single group, age, whatever, just because we need so much help. And so
Right. Must be large.
Yeah, we've got school groups that come and help. We've got corporations. We have everybody.
Okay. Can you tell us, with like details, like the whole process from cultivating to carrying, to collecting, transporting, and how that goes?
Sure. So we really lucked out the past few years. The city has a huge greenhouse facility, and they use that for growing the annual flowers they put in the flower beds.
Okay.
And because of COVID, their budget was slashed significantly. And so they said, if you can buy the materials, our staff will take care of your seedlings. And that way, you'll only have to pay a fraction of the cost for your seedlings. We'll be able to do something productive with our facility. And so they've done that for us for the past 3 years now. And so we're talking, we have 100 flats, which translates to about 5,000 seedlings.
Okay.
So we have 4 volunteers that show up with their cars, their trucks, their vans. We load those seedlings up. We divide that between my backyard and my co-director's backyard. And then before each planting, we go through and we set aside which plants are going to go to that next garden.
Okay, and then once the plant gets to the garden, what next?
So we make sure that we have enough volunteers to help us plant that garden site. And so what would usually take 2 or 3 people a day, maybe 2 days of work, we are able to get done in 2 hours because we have this great group of volunteers that's there that gets it planted. So it's so rewarding. We start with a blank slate. Usually parks goes through and they prepare the bed so that it's weeded and ready to go. And then we transform that blank slate into an instant vegetable garden.
I see. Oh, see. So it seems like the Parks and Recreation is still doing a lot of heavy lifting as well.
They are an essential partner, and their buy-in is so important. So they not only prep the beds for us, but then they also take care of the watering, which we're a really dry, windy area, and if you miss one day of watering in the middle of the summer, everything dies.
Oh no.
Yeah. So we're living on the edge.
I see that. I'm from Florida, so nothing like that at all.
Yeah.
Let's see. And then let's say once the food has grown and it's time to harvest, how do you collect them? How do you transport them?
So we maintain the beds. We have volunteers at every bed at least once a week. And we start harvesting probably the end of this month. We start harvesting lettuces and the quicker crops, radishes and that. And our volunteers, they pick which food pantry or which shelter, which organization is going to receive that food. They help us harvest it, and then they help us transport it to the facility.
So do you have when you say they help you transport it, how do they help you transport it?
So we transport by our cars, by our bikes, sometimes just walking it, because oftentimes the organization that is a recipient of that food, they're just a mile or
I see.
yeah.
Everything local.
We try to keep it as much community as possible, just for that buy-in, that everybody appreciates and understands how important that is for that organization to get that food.
So, does that mean the food is, let's say I harvest it in this garden A, it doesn't go back to a facility for any kind of processing. It goes directly to the receiving organization?
Exactly. Yeah. So a lot of times we will harvest it that morning and it will be distributed within a few hours.
So how do you, I mean, you guys have any issues with food waste? Do you have any issues with, anything like that, cleanup?
There is minimal food waste, just because a lot of our food waste is associated with food sitting around too long.
Right.
So yeah, the fact that we often plan the harvest with the distribution of the organization, that maintains that there's minimal waste. And also a lot of our food pantries, they have a network within themselves. So say one food pantry's distribution is Wednesday afternoon, they don't distribute all that food. They know the other organization that has a distribution Wednesday night or Thursday morning, so they get it to them. So it's fabulous that there's that interconnectivity in that community to make sure that there's minimal food waste.
That's fantastic. So you mentioned water in the seeds already. What about fertilizer or pesticide?
So we are organic. We want to make sure that our volunteers are safe. We want to make sure that the environment, that the birds, that bugs, everything, the soil is safe. And we want to make sure that the recipients of that food are safe. So we're all organic. We do fertilize with fish emulsion. We compost. So we use methods that make sure that the soil is healthy, and in turn that the plants are going to be healthy.
So do you know how many tons are produced annually?
So last year was our biggest year, and we grew, and I'm sorry, I was going to convert this to kilos and I didn't do that. So last year we grew 9,770 pounds of produce.
How do you keep track of that number?
So Each time we harvest in the field, we have, those luggage scales that so you can see if your suitcase is going to be too heavy to go, it's above what the airlines allow. So we have that in the field, and we just weigh our bags and then tally it up. So we keep a record for each garden site.
Fantastic. And how do you decide who to deliver the food to?
Our volunteers get to choose who is the recipient, and they need to decide that in advance before we even order the seedlings in January, just because each one of the food pantries or the shelters serve a different community. And so everybody has, a different preference on what they eat. For instance, when we first started out, our garden was beautiful because we had this beautiful big chard and kale, and we were taking that to the food pantries and the shelters, and they're saying, that's really nice, but our clients don't want that.
I see.
So it's like, okay, so what do they want? And it's fabulous because we're not only making sure we grow what that group is interested in, but we're also demonstrate, because we're in public places, that look, yes, you can grow tomatoes here, you can grow peppers here. It's also a demonstration garden.
So do you have any regulations as to how forms that people have to fill out before or anything like that to get things in order, or how do you actually organize the people with the pantries and the food?
Most of our volunteers are already connected to the community, so they already know about, for instance, there's Same Cafe in our community, and Same is an acronym for So All May Eat. So there is no set price. So if you go in there and you don't have funds, you can say wash dishes, or you can clean up or whatever in exchange for a healthy, delicious meal. So there's so many wonderful organizations, and our volunteers are aware of them. So there's already that connectivity.
What types of seeds do you use? Are they natives or do they come from corporations?
We get a lot of donated seeds, and then the rest we order from seed companies that, if possible, we want to do local, just because we have this very temperamental growing conditions here. And so the longer the seeds have been growing in that environment, the more tolerant they are to our droughts, to our short seasons and that. So
right.
Yeah, we try to support those type of businesses.
Right. Local, I see.
Yes.
You already touched on this, but I wanted to open it up as a question. Are there any bonds, communications between the volunteers and the beneficiaries?
There are, and what I try to do is get as many volunteers as possible to deliver to the food pantries or to the soup kitchens or whatever, because that is so rewarding. When you take produce to the food pantries, first of all, you get to see there's a huge line of people waiting to get that food, because we're bringing it the day of distribution, and
right.
people start lining up hours in advance because they want to be able to have the healthy stuff in there. So when our volunteers drop off, first of all, they get to see, yes, this is really important. Yes, a lot of people need this. And second, as they're walking past that line, they have people stop them and say, thank you so much for doing this. And there is that opportunity for people to have that discussion.
Right. I mean, it must be very rewarding and impactful.
A few years ago, when I was delivering a big bunch of fresh greens to a local food pantry, an older woman stopped me and she said, I haven't seen greens that beautiful since I helped my grandmother in the garden. And I hope you get some of these. And she said, well, if I do, I'm going to fix them for my grandchildren today. I mean, how neat is that it goes from her grandmother to now she's a grandmother. So yeah, it really touches your heart when you do that, and it motivates you to keep doing it.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
So you also touched on this earlier as well about the role the local government has had. If you were, kind of like encouraging this in other places, how would you tell people to interact with their local government?
If you can find a staff person that works, for the mayor, the governor, a council person, some representative, that's going to be your best in. Or if you have somebody, a friend that is well connected with someone in politics,
Mhm.
helps to get your foot in the door with someone like that. Yeah, so we lucked out because that group of people that started our organization, there were some staff members, city council members that knew the right person to contact.
I see.
Yeah, we're a big city, so you need that. But if you're in a smaller community, I bet that there's more opportunities to meet the person who's going to make that decision and
That makes sense.
chat with them.
And this might be also connected. Have you had local government wanting to end the program?
Yeah, a lot of people like flower beds. And so we've had in one part where a few people in the neighborhood who are more vocal just said, hey, this isn't what we want. We want to switch that back. And so in that one park, for one season, it did switch back to a flower bed, which was great because it motivated all those people who weren't speaking up, who really liked the idea of the vegetable garden, to contact their council member and the mayor and say, hey, wait a minute, this is a really good program. We want it back.
Right. So I guess the trick here is to motivate the local populace as well.
Definitely engage local people to contact people in power or, write to the paper, whatever, and just say how important it is. And that's a great way for also getting more volunteers is, putting word out there on social media and newspapers, wherever, about what you're doing. Because volunteers are essential. We wouldn't be here if not for those volunteers.
Right. Do you think there's been any impact of when there's like a political change from one candidate to the other?
Oh yeah, definitely. We first started, we wanted to get into the governor's mansion because we wanted to do what the Obamas were doing, but on a state level. So it made sense to do the governor's mansion. And that administration that we first contacted were not interested. But when the mayor, who was Hickenlooper, became governor, then we had a staff member there who said, hey, why don't you try this again? So yeah, definitely political tides. They even trickle down to the little stuff that we're doing.
Fantastic. Foot in the door.
That's right.
Do you think that program has contributed to reducing hunger?
It has, but unfortunately, with COVID, I don't know if you guys had this situation in Colombia, but there were images on our news of mile-long lines of people in cars waiting to get food from food banks and food pantries in the country. And so, that really motivated more volunteers to get engaged with us. But when you look at that line and then you think, okay, we're growing 9,000 pounds annually, that covers just a small fraction. But on the other hand, too, we hope to inspire people that with their vegetable garden, they'll say, well, I've got a lot of extra tomatoes today or peppers. And they see what we've done and they're like, well, there's a food pantry right down the street. I can do the same thing.
Right.
So, we personally aren't making a huge difference, but hopefully we're inspiring more people to, because the more of us that do engage, that the smaller that gap is between who gets healthy food and who doesn't.
Yeah. And I mean, during times of food scarcity, 9,000 pounds can be the difference between making it or not. So it's still a huge impact. And
there are the families that do receive it, it does make a huge difference.
Exactly. Yeah. Are there similar experiences in the US and do you advise them?
I'm sorry, are there similar experiences in the US?
Yeah, so are there other projects similar to the Colorado Grow Local Park in the US, and do you advise them?
No, we just do what we're here, we do provide information to other people that contact us and say how to get started. Yeah, so we are just limited to our community. We would love to, expand, but we have a small budget, and those of us who are involved, we're all volunteers. So yeah, just here. But with the U.S., more and more having edible forests, as you were talking about, Juan, which is fabulous. Yeah, so slowly the word is getting out that, hey, let's convert our public places, our churches, our schools. Let's grow more food for ourselves.
Fantastic. Yeah, definitely helps, in convincing people to grow their own stuff.
Definitely.
So you mentioned how there was a lot of demand during the COVID pandemic. Was there any other impacts done by the COVID pandemic?
Yeah, first, public places were closed down, so we weren't sure that we were going to be able to grow in the parks. And it wasn't until just a few weeks before we needed to plant, if we were going to, that they said, yes, you can, but volunteers have to be masked. And then last year they were saying volunteers in parks, you have to show proof of vaccination, you have to be masked, social distance. So it did, slightly impact it. And also there were a lot of protests going on too because of Black Lives Matter. And
Right.
it's kind of where everybody in our community comes together to get politically involved, to demonstrate, and that's where our gardens were. So there were a few times when there was a lot happening where police, the city park officials said, you guys, you can't go in there. It's too crazy, which, yeah, that would. But even in the midst of all of that turmoil, our gardens were never vandalized. There was a lot of vandalism going on all around, but people respected what was happening there. And, when we were in the middle of it, people would say, hey, this is a great idea. So,
right.
Yeah.
In general, are the parks respected, or do you guys have any issues with, people taking the food or anything along those lines?
And for the most part, it is amazing that there's minimal vandalism. There's minimal people taking stuff. One year we had cabbage that was taken, which to me is like, well, why wouldn't you take a tomato instead of a I didn't get that, but it's so minimal. And I figured whoever took that cabbage needed it.
Right.
Yeah, but it's amazing how little damage and or just free picking is done.
Do you guys have any parks with free picking?
No, we don't.
I see.
In one of the suburbs of Denver, Wheat Ridge, they are putting in a food forest, which will be free picking.
Oh, wow. Tell me about that project. When was that one due?
I think that's like they did that right before the pandemic, and I haven't heard an update on how that's going.
I see. Okay, fantastic. So we're almost done with the questions here. I wanted to know if there's anything you'd like to add. Tell us about the most beautiful experience.
That's so hard because there's so many positive experiences. Every time I'm in a garden, I learn something from other gardeners. It might be a recipe, it might be a tip on how to garden, it might be an organization that needs food. So I would say as far as the most touching is for a school garden that we help out with, which is South High here in Denver.
Mm-hmm.
In the springtime, the class that has kids with various learning disabilities, they help us with a garden. And they just love to be able to get outside and just get away from that classroom setting.
Right.
Even if they're unable to physically participate in the gardening, it's a positive experience for them. They just love being out there. And, it's the same for us who are volunteering. It is so joyful to be with kids that find joy in gardening and just have an escape from what's going on in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just very human to want to be outside.
Definitely.
So I think I'm going to end the conversation here, at least the recording part.